Well, a very good morning. Thanks for clicking on to the December Outlook edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It's Monday the 23rd of November. Thanks for clicking on. If you're watching on YouTube, a very warm welcome. And yeah, we've had a very chilly weekend and the coldest spell of weather really since late last winter. For some, we've seen snow. For most, we've seen at least a frost and ice issue over the course of the weekend. We're opening on a very, very chilly note this morning, but milder air is going to make a comeback through the course of today as we see the high over the Atlantic sink south, and the winds going around the top of that high is going to pull in somewhat milder ocean air. Not quite as mild as we have seen over the first half of the month. We were pulling in air from the subtropics. This time around we'll have a more typical northwesterly flow, cooler but still closer to average rather than above average or below average like we've got this past weekend. Temperatures yesterday were certainly solidly below normal. We had a strong north wind. We had wind gusts in excess of 71 miles an hour on the Lincolnshire coast. And we are going to be talking about mild air, like I say, making a comeback. But overall, November will be one of the warmest on record for not just the UK, but indeed the entire continent of Europe overall. And it's interesting when you look at the indices. We had a cool wet summer, that's for sure. Warm over the continent, one of the warmest on record. It was certainly the warmest, second warmest summer since '63, I believe, in Spain. And what's interesting to see here, the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation was firmly negative during the summer season, which produced that type of pattern. Of course, the same type of drivers as we get into the autumn season with that transition period, we then start to see a different response to the atmosphere. We've seen, like 2009, a more positive Arctic Oscillation, a more positive North Atlantic Oscillation, and that of course produced some drier and warmer conditions through September, October, and then like I said to you, we need to watch out because that dry September-October period tends to flip in November. And we've seen that. We've seen warmer. We've seen much, much wetter conditions. And therefore, as a result, we are looking at the fairly saturated ground here. So it's a very similar turnaround to what was seen back in 2009. I know I keep referring to that. But it looks as if December of 2015 is going to open fairly mild, driven by the Atlantic. We've got a positive Arctic Oscillation, we've got a positive North Atlantic Oscillation. That supports more of a North Atlantic trough and indeed a European ridge. So we're going to stay with the overall theme that we've seen during the month of November, milder and indeed wetter than normal. Now the CFSV2 500 millibar height anomalies look like this. This is the hemispheric pattern view. You can see here the trough sitting close to Iceland here. That represents more ridging over the European continent, as you can see, and the progression into Western Europe here. So we're going to see systems coming in off the Atlantic, bringing that wet, milder with it. The temperatures of the CFSV2 look like this for December, and you can see here precipitation well above normal. The Canadian model shows very similar. It has that negative, that trough, sitting closer to the UK, but the overall emphasis remains on that warmer, wetter theme. And I think that's going to be the case through at least the first half of December. So winter 2015-16 isn't necessarily going to open on a particularly cold note, that's for sure. And it's going to be interesting to see as we push towards the Christmas period what happens. The Canadian upper height field anomaly shows this here. So the CFSV2 and the Canadian are very much in the same page with the overall setup for December. But these models are not the greatest tools. We've seen that classically at the end of October when it showed initially the CFSV2 showing a drier than normal November. And then of course look what happened. So we can't necessarily go with these longer range models. Precipitation of the Canadian, like the CFSV2, is wetter than normal. Now, the positive Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation very much coincides with the stratospheric temperature profile at 50 HPA, sorry. You can see here that we've got the negative here extending from Asia over the pole and in towards North America here. We've got, and this is the chart for 7 days from now, a fairly strong positive over the UK, negative over Greenland. So that supports that positive NAO signal. I want to emphasize something, folks. The NAO and the AO are good tools for the middle and second half of winter seasons, not so much the first half. So I would use caution in terms of trying to go by this to determine what type of pattern we're going to get later down the road. It's really not until we hit January and February with the NAO AO response with the ocean really truly kicks in. But it does look as if the stratospheric temperature profile coincides quite well with what the GFS ensemble has for much of December. Now you can see here, this is 10 days from now, and we've got that negative over Greenland, the positive over the UK. That overall suggests that we are going to see a more positive NAO, positive Arctic oscillation, and a reasonably wet, mild December overall. That doesn't necessarily mean, folks, that we aren't going to see any type of cold and snow during the month of December. I do think through the first 15, possibly 20 days of the month, we're not going to see an awful lot really. But we need to watch out as we push towards late December that we don't start to see a change taking place here as the winter season and the atmosphere starts to really enter a more winter time mode. But you can see the high here over the North Pacific extend into Alaska. That supports colder into the United States, not so much over Europe, I'm afraid here. So I'm just showing you exactly what I'm seeing right now. Sea surface temperature profile looks like this at the moment. Strong El Nino, very evident, but you also notice the warmest water is off the South American coast here. You also see still a warm North Pacific, but interesting enough, we're starting to see cooler than normal appearing on the western edge of the warm pool that's driven the cold over eastern North America through the course of the past 2 winter seasons. Important to note, we've got warmer than normal now around the UK and Ireland here. That's driving with the El Nino warmer weather conditions into the UK overall. But it's important to note that warmer than normal to the north of the UK, north coast of Iceland and around Greenland could support middle to late winter more positive over Greenland and the North Atlantic here. So that would support more colder weather in the Western Europe. Now look at this here, the similarity to 2009, particularly over the North Atlantic. We've got the cold pool over the central portion of the ocean, warm in and around the Greenland coast, warm on the north coast of Iceland, warm to the north of the UK here. So what does that tell me? We've got a similar type of ocean profile in the North Atlantic, certainly, as we did back in 2009. One big difference, the El Nino is not as strong, even though we entered a moderate El Nino period during the winter season. The emphasis being that the warmest waters was always shifting away from South America like we're seeing at the moment. And the biggest difference is the North Pacific here. We've got a much colder North Pacific than we did have back in 2000, or should I say than we do now. But that is the one big difference here. So really, folks, there's a lot of things to look at here over the current period. Yes, a warmer December looks more likely at this point in time, but it doesn't mean we're not going to get cold late month towards Christmas, New Year. And I do think that we're going to see a more interesting winter type pattern as we push into the month of December. Remember what I've said all along, that the winter would be very much an up and down scenario, cold, mild probably outweighing against the cold in terms of duration, but watching out when the cold does hit, it could have quite a punch here, and I do think that's going to be the case. But the majority of December as of now looks reasonably mild and wet. So to summarize, December 1st through 15th largely Atlantic driven with frequent wind and rain coming in, and December 15th through 31 potential for a turn to colder with snow coverage increasing. So there you go. That's the forecast for the month of December. Thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, you don't subscribe, but you're wanting to know more, for as little as 69 pence, you can sign up and get the full content, full premium content with daily videos and written posts for both Europe and North America. Hope you have a great Monday. Bye for now.